A lot of the people that we're watching that are involved in these bizarre things, for example, we had a relative of Epstein that came out here several months back, and she said that the whole family has a history of being Baal worshipers. Pretty bizarre. Okay, that's in the Epstein stuff. Epstein himself said he's a product of the Rothschild family. Oh, the Rothschild family did this wonderful thing. They worked out a deal in 1917 called the Balfour Declaration, and Lord Rothschild and Lord Balfour worked out a deal to allow the Jews to go in and buy land in the Palestine district controlled by England, and then with the purpose that if they get to enough land that they've purchased, they can then declare themselves a nation and reform the nation of Israel. You know, very post-Esther-esque in the Bible, where some of the people went back and they rebuilt and went back and occupied the city and the land. So imagine who would be somebody like the Rothschilds. Why would they do that? You know, there's lots of history where many of them are occultic. Well, there's all sorts of things. Christ himself said those are, you know, there's scripture. I didn't say Christ. There's many of those that say they're Jew, but they're not, okay? And even the person running the temple at Christ's time, Caiaphas, did very, you know, ungodly things. So you can be in the church and put on all the right robes, and still it's a facade. It's not who you really are. You know, Christ himself challenged the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the temple leaders and said, "Ye are of your father, the devil." Okay? So they were claiming different fatherhood. In fact, if you go back, I'm going somewhere with this, so just stay with me for a second. It might take me a second to pull these pieces together, so I apologize. Imagine within cults, within the occult, you know, there's people that have a different flavors, like churches, it's like clubs, whatever. You got the Elks Club, you got the Moose Clubs, you got something else. Nothing against either of those. I'm just saying that, you know, people have a certain belief and then their actions follow their belief, okay? You can be part of a Protestant church and there's, you know, a dozen, 100 different flavors. Even a local church body, you can have two that belong to the same organization, but this one's kind of leans this way, more towards kids. This one's over in more of a retired community, same, you know, denomination, but they're quite a bit different, right? So within the cults, there is kind of a common theme. Many of them believe, and the cult of kings is that their real father is Cain, and that Cain's real father was Satan, Lucifer, the devil. That Satan, Lucifer, the devil had got into the garden, beguiled Eve. It was sexual in nature, and then the child of that beguiling was Cain. And then Eve taught Adam the trick, and then she became pregnant by two different persons in the same birth cycle, that Adam and Cain were born twins. Now, we don't have to believe that, okay? You don't have to get hung up. I don't see that in the Bible. Oh, sacrilege, it's wrong. No, we're talking about cults that all of them have different personal beliefs on this and kind of got a certain flavor. You can go into churches, you can go into, you know, covens, and they all have a little different flavor of what they exactly believe. Well, no, You must be immersed. No sprinkling allowed. You must be immersed, full immersion if you're going to be baptized. That's the way it's done. It's in the Bible. Okay, well, but no sprinkling is just fine. It's better. And the gases and the vapors and everything else. Different flavors. So in the cults, most of them have a core belief that Lucifer, this angel that was cast out of heaven, fell to earth. Christ said, I saw you fall to earth like lightning. Okay? And by the way, one other thing, wherever Tika went, one other thing I wanted to mention. When you talk about frequency, what's one of the features that the scriptures refer to the devil? A lot of times when people talk about somebody that's broken mentally, who's not working right, who's gone crazy or something like that, who doesn't make sense, they used to talk about them having their pipes are broken, their pipes are cracked. In the scriptures, it refers to this fallen angel as having been in the throne room of God, and his very being was a pipe making music that he actually in his physical body had. It was an instrument. Frequency. Okay. When he did that, his frequencies were changed or damaged.
To that point, there's the dark light and the harmonic light. And in my training, what I've understood is most of the electromagnetic fields that we're using right now is the dark light, which is the same energy as fear, cancer. And that's where a lot
That's why, Tika, you kind of sparked something for me. So I wanted to kind of go somewhere with this. And stay with me. It'll take a minute. I'm sorry. I'm trying to grab a bunch of stuff. I haven't, scripted anything out, but I'm just thinking of stuff that was shared. So, by the way, when she talks about colors and like that, when we look with cameras or when we use lasers, we use different kinds of lights for different types of effect. With certain lasers, I had a laser thing we were doing years and years and years and years ago. And the scientist that I was working with was very precise about the frequency of the light that we had to use. And it had to be within 2 angstrom. As soon as we deviated just the tiniest amount, it wouldn't do what we wanted it to do. And the short version is we were punching holes in concrete at like 30 miles. So it was pretty wild, and it had to be that precise. The different light, emits different frequencies, has very different effects. And if you can channelize it down to very different things. In fact, all of the aquariums that are out here around the world where they put food in and all that, you had the first killer whales and like that. A friend of mine was the guy that when they had Namu and then Shamu, the problem is you bring food in to feed the whale and he's in a big tank. You don't want to run the water from the area where these aquariums are at in from the area of water because it might be polluted from septic tanks, from ships, other things, and you could just kill them with biological, get a bacterial bloom. So they're trying to filter water, but seawater has all sorts of mineralization in it that's needed. And so it's very hard to filter the seawater and keep it sterile enough, even with the food you bring in, because they're all eating raw, fish and like that could kill them. So what they did, Namu died, and it was ultimately a bacterial infection. And from being in this tank. So they stopped, because killer whales, there's not that many out there, and you didn't want to be killing them for research. And then they came up with a different way of doing it and had Shamu, the second one. And they put this huge bank in a room full of lights, and the lights emitted ultraviolet at 1160 angstrom. And that light sterilized the bacterials out of the water and the viral material out of the water without taking the mineralization out of the water. It was being sterilized by light, not by a filter. Okay. And we do the same thing with like the Legionnaire's disease. What was the cure for the Legionnaire's disease? It was in the air conditioning ducts. It was bacteria in viral material. And so what they do, they added a room after the air conditioner and around the radiators for the air conditioner systems and heat systems. Because, think of it, they're running moisture, they're running constant temperature. It's like a petri dish. Okay, you're growing all these biologicals in a petri dish. So they use light at 1160 angstrom to sterilize that air, keep the bacterial and biologicals from coming. And of course, light has a frequency, in this case, 1160 angstrom exactly. If you go too high, it doesn't have the same effect on the biologicals if you go too low. So now think about it. I'm going somewhere with this. I promise, okay? I'm going somewhere. So imagine, I'm just trying to get you got to get in the mind of your enemy. Who are we fighting here really? Okay, what are we fighting here really? It's the kids, it's society, it's technology, it's the hospitals off on the wrong track. It's the guys, doing 1,000 different things trying to control us. Well, what's the ultimate thing behind it? There's an evil entity behind this. That's where we come from a religious standpoint, good and evil, right? If you don't believe in evil, you think that it's all good. Well, I think that's a conversation. I think you're nuts. But so, but it's a conversation. So now we think about the garden. Adam and Eve are there. All the animals, all the plants, everything else. And there's an intruder in the garden. Well, in classical stuff, he sneaks in and he hides amongst the green leaves of the trees of the garden, camouflaged. And where's Adam? Remember, Eve was the one that was beguiled. Where in the world is Adam? Well, Adam's been around for a while. Classically, what the rabbis oftentimes will tell you is that there's a scripture that Noah's sin was as Adam's. What? Noah's sin was as Adam's? Yes, what he liked was the alcohol. He'd get drunk. And so the conjecture is, there's no scripture really backs this up except this one little teeny snippet that Adam would occasionally go have some of the fermented fruit and go on a trip or whatever, go to sleep. And he wasn't there. Where was he in the garden? It's a big garden. Where was he to protect Eve? See, Adam was older mentally. He was created long before Eve. He was the greatest scientist ever. He named all the plants, all the animals. He was given the earth and everything in it. And then he was given authority over everything in the earth that he was given. So he had to go learn about it. When his brain finally finished with all of this mapping of this gift that he was giving as he was growing, he got upset. I have checked everywhere. I looked under all the leaves, behind the rocks. I've organized the gardens. It says he was a kind of a groundskeeper for the garden. He was putting everything in place. He actually made it quite beautiful. It wasn't just random. He brought organization, civility, structure to the garden the way it was laid out. In all of that, he saw that all the animals, everything that's there, hey, there's nobody like me. Everybody else has paired off. I'm the only one like me. There's nobody with the same flesh as I have. When he realizes that, he gets put to sleep, and that's when God creates Eve out of his own flesh. This is my flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And so Eve is exactly as Adam is. So now they're mates. But Adam was somewhere gone. And so wasn't there to protect Eve. He was much older. And so Eve was way younger. She's having to learn all this stuff. When they talk about weaker, she just didn't have, it's not that she didn't have the mental faculties, because she was made exactly like Adam as far as her mental abilities, etc. But she didn't have the history. And so she's having to learn from Adam. Well, having been married now for 3 years, I can tell you right now, there's some stuff where there's still a learning. The question is which way it's going precisely. But anybody Jerry, can you give me a ride back home to the hotel later? I might need that. I might be walking. Anyway, so Eve, what was the temptation for Eve about this tree? If you eat of the fruit, you'll be like God, who taught Adam everything. He walked morning and evening with the Creator, which is Christ. Manifesting Christ said, I and the Father am one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. So God put on human flesh like we put on a jacket and walked amongst us. Okay. So Christ said, I and the Father am one. So you can't actually distinguish. Am I praying to the Father or am I praying to Christ? Am I praying to the Father? They're the one. It's just that for the expression, for the interaction, it's a human walking with us. That's Christ walking in the garden with Adam, walking across time, like we walk across the street. So Eve's temptation was, instead of having to learn everything from Adam and go through the steps to learn everything, she could eat of the apple and know all this difference between good and evil and what's going on. She could know it all. And Adam wasn't there right at the time. He said, no, I'll teach you, babe. Relax. And so let me jump ahead. She has Cain. Cain is within these occult groups, a hybrid. He's not merely human. He's more than human. He's human plus. We might say, well, he's less than human. From their perspective, he's more than human because he has the DNA or he has something in his being that is from his real father, okay? And if you look in the scriptures, by the way, there's nowhere where it attributes Cain to Adam. Doesn't list Cain as a child of Adam. So there's that. So Cain and Abel, half brothers, devil whispers in his ear, and if you get rid of Abel, you get everything. You and your seed. If you destroy Adam, see, where was Cain going after he killed Abel? By many of the counts, he's going to kill Adam next. And then the only way, and here's something, you guys have heard a lot of this wild stuff. One of the unique things amongst some of these families is that they intermarry within their own brothers and sisters and relatives, even the parents and like that. Why? Because they're mimicking something that they want to do, concentrating the DNA or something. And what is it? If Cain, after killing Abel, had been able to kill Adam, how would life go on the earth? What was the satanic deception that was actually there or plan? Because the devil does have a plan. It might be twisted, broken, but he has a plan. What's the plan? God gave the earth and everything that's in it to Adam and his seed, his heritage. If Adam dies and all of his seed die, God is a liar. He can't do what he said. He's not God. What did the devil want to do? He wanted to be as God. He wanted to be a co-equal with God. He didn't be greater than God because there's nothing greater. He wanted to be a co-equal. That was pride. So when he wanted to be a co-equal, if he can bring God down to his level, now God has to work with him. Because what's going on? If God blesses Cain in order to bless Adam, he also has to bless the devil's seed. How does the devil beat God at his own game? He gave the earth and everything to Adam and his seed. And he cursed Satan and cast him out of heaven. Now, if the Satan seed is co-joined with the Adam seed, if Adam is dead and there's no possibility of a pure human left, if Eve has sex with her own son, any child is a hybrid. Once Adam's dead, after Abel's dead, if there's no other descendants of Adam, you must have hybrids, or God's promise to Adam and his seed is gone. If you do bless the hybrids, now God has to bless that which he cursed. He has to reverse what he was going to do. He said Satan, is cursed, cast out of heaven. Now all of a sudden, curse is lifted. Remember, children and offspring is a blessing, right? That's what the father of the faithful is all about, Abraham. To have children, descendants, as the sand of the seashore for number, as the stars in the heaven, more than there's sand in the seashore for number. Yeah, that's the blessing. The devil understands it, so it goes right at the core of the whole heart of the matter for planet Earth, to go after who gets to own the earth, the offspring. So let me jump ahead now. Am I losing you guys? Are you with me? Am I going too slow? Okay, I'm trying to help you to kind of think, who's our enemy? What's going on here? Why attack the children? Why are the children so key? And I'm going to come back to frequency and other stuff in prisons and all sorts of things. Well, I'm getting there. You better hold on. You're getting ahead of the game here. My gosh, you're speeding it. You want to do it? Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I'll answer some questions if you guys want to stay after. But okay, so here's the deal. Let's skip forward for a second. Something interesting in our world today. I've talked about it even just the other day. We have World Heritage sites all over the planet, for humanity. We have to preserve these things. UN World Heritage sites for generations to come. We got to save them all. So one site that's a World Heritage site is uniquely at the highest altitude of all World Heritage sites. And there was a couple other ones. There was one in Switzerland they wanted to do, and it was higher than this one. And they said, no, we won't do it because it's too high of an altitude. You can do it at the base of the mountain, not at the top. At the top of Mount Hermon, there's a World Heritage site, about a little under 6,000 feet. What does it commemorate? The whole world must honor this thing. It's so important to the world. It's so important. It's the highest altitude World Heritage site. What happened? At the top of Mount Hermon, the legend is that 200 aliens to Earth landed and then came down from the top of the mountain. Landed from where? I saw you fall like lightning from heaven. Landed at the top of Mount Hermon, went down to the base of Mount Hermon, and there they built a city. Mount Hermon's on the border between Israel and Syria. Okay? At the base of Mount Hermon, they built a city. You know what the city's name is? Baal. It's the city of Baal. And those that occupied the city were of stature and their children were men of stature. They were very smart, and they were very tall. Okay? And at a certain point in their legends, this isn't, this is other people's stuff. In their legends, we're reading their mail. So there's variations on this. So if you say it's just exactly this way. Well, in the Catholic Church, they teach it this way, and the Protestant, they teach it this way, and over in this other one, they teach it this other way, okay? And it's like some of the semantics on the physics. We get to different groups, and what I like to refer to as a torsion effect, other people have different terms for it. It's the same effect, it's just a different name. A rose by any other name is still a rose. Whatever language it is, the rose didn't change. How you're referring to that rose may change. So these 200 were all male in their legend and preferred the company of each other, so it would appear maybe gay. But they knew that they were going to die without any offspring because of whatever. So they made a pact, according to their legend. They made a pact, and the leader of their group said, we must essentially procreate with the humans. Some of the legends say it was with other animals also. So they may very well have had technology to allow them to do gene splicing and things like that, other things. But apparently they could have sex with, they chose for themselves of the women whoever they wished, and nobody could resist, okay? And had offspring. And the offspring were men of stature that were, giants. And they were men of renown. They had intellect. They were, in a very whatever society. The city of Baal at the base of Mount Hermon had gateways or doorways you could come through, and they were archways. And so we know that because one of them was preserved. Baal was destroyed by the humans at some point in time. And one of the archways was kept all down through the centuries until just a few years ago, when ISIS blew it up. But before ISIS blew up that doorway, it had been perfectly photographed and preserved, very high resolution photography in every angle, so it could be duplicated. And that archway, multiple archways now go on tour around the world. So we know kind of what the city was like. We know the layout, and it was a city that practiced child sacrifice. Okay, now we see in the scriptures in the Bible that the people coming into the promised land when they left Egypt, they were, told not to make their children to pass through the fire. That's a very church pulpit Sunday way of saying, don't roast your kids alive as a sacrifice. Like, I want that. Okay. I don't want those kind of sacrifices. God doesn't want that. But the practice was in place. So he had to specifically tell them, don't offer your kids as sacrifices. And specifically there in Baal, what were they practicing? Child sacrifice. If you brought a child to these aliens, they could sacrifice it. And by the way, within the scriptures, what do they do with the meat from the sacrifices brought to the temple for offerings? They eat it. The priests eat it. So it's a reasonable thing to assume, and there is writings that back this up, that apparently after the children were brought for a sacrifice, these Baal priests would eat the children. Now jump forward into a different location in Israel. What was the whole thing on top of the hill about with Elijah? Elijah went up there, had this thing challenging the priests of Baal. And he said, if God's with you guys and you're supposed to be doing these sacrifices, because they're in the middle, by the way, he proclaimed a drought because the people were so far out of whack with God. And the drought came on there, and it's 3-year drought. They're out of water. Everything's just horrible. So they want him to stop the drought. They recognized that he had spiritual power. Way with God, he could get something done when he asked God to do something. He asked for a drought and got it. Now they want him to ask God not to have the drought. And so he challenges the priests of Baal. And he says, on their turf, they always like to be on the tops of the mountains. Frequency, there's some stuff there, but it's also because they were cast down out of heaven. Why do they want to be in the high places? When you go to cities and you look for demonic architecture of things that are going on, the demons like the highest place in the city. Okay, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness in high places. And there's physically high, which they like, but there's also politically high. There's also business high, science high. There's different states that they want to be in. So then, in this challenge, the priests of Baal build an altar, and they're going to just ask God to bring down lightning, take the sacrifice, and show that God likes them. And Elijah's going to do the same thing and see if he can get God to take his sacrifice. But it was on the top of the mountain. It was at the power point of the energy grid, if you will, for the demonic, where these guys had carefully put their altar at the top of the hill, and they're having people bring their children and sacrifice them to Baal, Moloch. In Israel? Yeah, they're totally mentally captured. Can you imagine how baked and twisted you would have to be as a society to allow that to happen? And then in a highly visible place where everybody can see what's going on. You can see the fire burning. Everybody in the town knows it. Well, I wouldn't take my kid up there. Well, you wouldn't get favor. You wouldn't necessarily get protection. And it's still a resonance coming from whatever was going on at Baal before the city of Baal was destroyed. Somebody else figured it out and destroyed it. But the practice is still going on there in the land. This is still in the same region. And so they go up on top of the thing. They're cutting themselves. They're making all the noise, the chants, the you know, it's insane. It's like a rock concert on steroids, right? And it's screaming and everything else. And Elijah's laughing at them. You know, scream louder, cut louder. Is your God taking a potty break? Is he up yet? Where is he? I don't see him. You know, come on, let's go. God, it's getting late. Wait already. Finally, he's ready to go. He says, okay, let me do this. No. You can't go do your thing yet. You've probably got pyrotechnics hidden in your altar here. We're sure of that. You've done it because you're going to try and fool us that God actually is going to support you. Oh, so you think I have pyrotechnics? What do you think they had in their fire? Now, why were they so upset? Their fire hadn't gone if the pyrotechnics weren't working. I guarantee you they had a no failure policy on this. And so, you know, I said, all right, let's go ahead and put some water on it. Water on it is a very precious commodity. They're in the middle of a drought. People are practically dying from the drought. So water's a big deal. They grab water, they douse the fire. Oh, is it, you know, wet enough? Yeah, you sure? It does it 3 times. And they're at the top of the hill. Where's the water come from? Who go gets it? The priest of Baal. Okay, here's some more. Can you imagine? Because they want to be thorough. You know, it's good water. I have a sip before I finally throw it on the thing. When Elijah prays, the whole thing is consumed literally with like a nuclear blast. People have looked at the rocks up there, say that the temperature has to have been almost nuclear somehow, you know, for where they think it was. God takes the sacrifice, and then they turn. Think of all the people who had sacrificed their own children. They were all up there, the priests of Baal who had received their children with great ceremony, formality, with all the sounds just right, the wailing, so you couldn't hear the children. And they give it to the priest. They take it over and they would put it in these great brass arms of this Moloch Baal idol. And it had doors on the stomach that would open out, and the arms were on wires or cables. They'd place the child in these red hot arms, and then it would roll into the belly of this Baal idol Moloch, shaped like a bull, red hot. And then they would close the doors. You would hear the child for a very brief period screaming, bodies to different things and fires. It's a horrid thing. But then realize also when it was done, if they were practicing the way that the Israelites were doing with the temple and all that, with their sacrifices, the priests were eating the bodies of these children after they were sacrificed. That was the practice. So when we think about this, the people saw this great spectacle. Unbelievable. I mean, imagine the pageantry, the drama, everybody going up, okay, this is the big day. He makes this challenge. It's all about ending the drought. Everybody shows up. Everybody is there. Good, bad, whatever side you're on, indifferent, I don't know, but it's going to be wild. Was there anything else to do that day in Jerusalem? No, everybody shows up. And when the lightning bolt comes down and takes Elijah's offering, what was the shock in the minds of those people? Oh my God. I believed these guys. I thought I was getting favor with God. I was doing what God wanted. I was giving their own children for sacrifice. They were so upset that they turned on the priests of Baal and killed every one of them. Now, they walked over and killed. No. There was a fight like you can't believe, I'm sure. And they turned on every one of them, chased them down the hill, makeup running, staff falling away, whatever, because they had all the ornaments on them. Because they're very priestly, they're very, priests of Baal, they walk around town like they own the place, which they did. That's why Elijah challenged them. And they killed everyone. And then a little later, after Elijah had a little moment and all that, the king went ahead and did a special little thing and killed off the rest of the priests of Baal too, in a very big, dramatic moment that, Jerry probably tell you about this next show. But the reason I mentioned that, it was so dramatic that the whole country, that whole part of the world, completely flipped on the priests of Baal, hunted them down, destroyed them all. They wouldn't have them in the land anymore. We're at that kind of a moment for us as a society. And one of the things that I wanted to stop and slow down, that's unique because you gave me the opportunity to bring this up, Tika. Imagine those priests of Baal. What were they like? What was our enemy like? Somehow you had a group of people came into the land. They displaced the previous people there who were doing child sacrifice also. They were the descendants of these giants, men of renown. So the whole land was corrupt. Pause for a second. Go back in time 500-600 years. What's the whole point of why the children of Israel, whose name was Jacob and God's name changed to Israel, third generation from Abraham, they went into the promised land and they displaced and killed all the monsters that were there, who were what? Giants. Because when the spies went in, I have a certain understanding affinity for the spies. I want to be on the good side guy of the spies, not the bad guy side. But they went into the land, and 12 of them went in, 10 of them came out. They all said, hey, it's a great place. It's the land of milk and honey. It's very fruitful. It's beautiful. It's got all sorts of everything we need. But 10 of them said, a little problem here. Excuse me, hold on. I don't know that we want to go in there. Why? Because the problem is there's giants in the land, and we were but grasshoppers in their sight. Og, the giant, his bed was 30 feet long. That's his bed. Goliath was only somewhere around 12 feet by most accounts. So if you're talking, there was bigger ones than, and by the way, when David went down and got 5 round stones out of the brook Kidron, and then went to go into battle with Goliath, why'd he get 5 stones? Back up in case I miss. No. He got 5 stones because Goliath had 4 brothers. And when he killed Goliath, they were coming for him. They were not going to back down. And in the way they do it, they call cousins, by another brother. It looks like Goliath had one actual brother, and then there were descendants of that brother, and so they call him brothers still. But he went and killed all of them. He didn't just kill one. He went after the whole tribe. Okay? And so go back for a second, though. Wait a second. The whole story of the promised land, where we all want to go, by the way, in this world, the story is that Abram, he lived in an area of the world that was very much into soothsaying, and they had every kind of divination that they practiced, and that people was very famous for that, and they could tell the future and all sorts of things. In fact, when Joseph was a slave in Egypt, generations later, Joseph, a descendant of the great grandson of Abraham, Jacob, Joseph went into Egypt. He was a slave, and then he got favor, and he became the guy that set everything up for the family, and then, how we're going to run the country. When the family showed up and they didn't realize it was him, he set them up by putting a cup of divination that belonged to him, which they must have seen somewhere, into Benjamin's backpack. Okay, so it was a cup of divination. What would have been the significance of that? Why would Joseph have gotten that? Because they knew that he was a descendant of the people that came from this area that could tell the future. He could read a dream. He could tell the whole thing. So he's helping get the illusion going for everybody to understand his cup of divination. So they're all very into the spiritual everything. Okay. So Abraham leaves this area of people looking into the future and all sorts of stuff. He doesn't have any children. He's had a dream. God told him that I'm going to give you children, and you're going to be as the sand of the seashore and the stars in the heaven for number. He believes the dream. That's why he's called the father of the faithful. He gets all of his servants, all of his cattle and sheep and, the Ferrari, everything, loads it up, and he takes off on a walkabout. And he goes and walks away from where he grew up with the Chaldeans, and he sojourns in the land. Everywhere, God told him, everywhere you plant the sole of your foot, I will give to you and your descendants as an inheritance forever. So Abraham walks around this region that we now call Israel, but it's really the greater Palestine area, all the way up into Syria, Lebanon, all these other places. Abraham is placing his feet in faith, in belief that God's going to give his descendants those places as a place to live. He doesn't even have a kid yet. That's why he's called the father of the faithful. He believed that God could make something happen even as he's getting older and older. When Abraham sojourned in the land, now you didn't see this coming. Wake up. How many, this is a really tough question, Jerry. I hope you can get this answer right. I mean, you've been reading every day, you've got your scriptures, you get the Bible out. Look, how many times did Abraham encounter giants in the land when he was walking through the area that God was going to give him? This is 500-600 years before the people went in there and, the walls came down at Jericho and everything else. How many giants? 0. There's no account of him encountering giants in the promised land. How'd they get there? Where'd they come from? Why were they there? You're the devil. You think the devil didn't see what God was doing with Abraham? You think that he didn't see the promises that Abraham was acting on? Of course the devil knew what Abraham was doing. Of course the devil knew what God was promising him. He knew the thing all the way back to Adam. God promised Adam and his seed the earth and everything in it as an inheritance, the physical body and everything that creeps and crawls and moves upon the earth, to Adam and his seeds, his children, his great-grandchildren, his children a trillion generations away. The devil's still in the same fight. He's trying to corrupt the DNA with his own so that he can have a part in the blessing that was promised to Abraham, and God can't do it. That's why he had to kill Abel, go for Adam. The only way that we can produce this further is with Eve. And so Cain, the hybrid, would have to have sex with his mother. Now, as crazy as that sounds, do you know that the national city in America is built around that exact story and symbology? That's what the Washington Monument's all about. You're effed as a country. It's at the center of the city. It's the penis of Osiris in their stories. And what's the penis of Osiris all about? Osiris was a god. I'm going somewhere with this whole time. I'm trying to pull all these loose pieces together so you see the bigger picture when we come back to child trafficking. In the story, in the myth, there was a good brother and a bad brother, and they were both gods, godlike, okay? Think back to Mount Hermon, these gods that fell to earth. The good brother was, it's Osiris and Set. And I have so many things going through my mind, sometimes I lose track. My wife tells me something, and 2 seconds later, I just told you that. It's not Alzheimer's, it's because I have other things going on in my brain. Anyway, honest. So Set is the good brother and likes humans and takes care of them and does stuff and all this other stuff. Osiris is the most evil of the gods and does all sorts of horrors to humans. So the good brother, this is a flip. They like reversals. They like mirrors. They like things upside down, backwards. The good brother, in this case, in this Cain-Abel inversion, kills the bad brother, Osiris. And then because he's a god, he could come back. So what does he do? He chops his brother, Osiris, into 12 pieces or 14 pieces. And then to make sure they can't come together and he can be reborn somehow or come back up, he scatters the pieces across the whole earth. The problem is his mother, their mother, because they're twins. Twins. Cain and Abel. Twins. The mother, Isis, where have you heard that name? Finds out that Set has killed Osiris Well, he's the most evil of all the gods. Maybe the mom would actually be glad. No, she goes out and she's upset and she gathers all the parts and pieces. But she can only find 13. The 14th is missing, which is the penis. Supposedly by a fish. There's like 50 different variations of the story. So the mother, Isis, fashions a penis out of stone, a dildo, attaches it to his body. Then the mother, Eve, if the devil kills Adam, the mother has sex with the dead corpse of her son. These people were twisted, baked. It's evil. You can't make sense of it. The mother has sex with the son, with the penis, the stone that she's created, and supposedly becomes pregnant. By the way, in the satanic version of this, think about how the devil can see technology, see things growing out there. Imagine this. Is that the first explanation, the first description to a very technologically low thing, but they're putting something into history and time of artificial intelligence, silicon life form? You know what silicon material is made out of? It's made out of sand. You make glass out of sand, okay? The ships are made out of sand, silicon. That's why we talk about in the sci-fi movies. I have a huge collection. I love my sci-fi stuff. Silicon life forms and biological life forms. So here you have a picture of the merging of stone, silicon-based matter with DNA. Very interesting. You think about if these people fell to earth, what happened? There's a lot of stuff. One of the greatest science fiction writers that ever lived was also one of the most prolific biblical scholars that ever lived, and wrote 180 books on the Bible and the Mideast and everything else. And it was his conclusion, and by the way, it's mine too, that we're living in a great big huge junkyard across our solar system, that there was humanoid life here in this part of our solar system. Not human because it wasn't descendants of Adam, but there was some kind of humanoid version, and in the course of some war, catastrophe, whatever, that's where these 200 came from. They fell to earth. And by the way, if you don't think that the world leaders believe this, the people that are in power, this cult that's been running things, let me give you a couple examples. 2012 Olympics. Queen Mother is at, the Windsor Castle, whatever. Daniel Craig playing James Bond, which is very occultish. Oh my gosh, if you knew all the story there. Two-ball cane, James Bond. That was the secret signature when he was communicating with the Queen. That was John Dee, who was a magician and a spy. So that's the original James Bond. Daniel Craig comes over to Windsor Castle, waits for the Queen, escorts her out to the royal helicopter. She gets in the helicopter. They fly off. They do a tour of all the statuary and symbology across London. They get to the great big huge Olympic Stadium. All the lights are turned down. The helicopter flies over, flashing green and red lights. It's hovering. They're waiting for it to descend and land in the middle of the stadium and the Queen to get out. That's not what happened! All of a sudden, she jumps from the helicopter with Daniel Craig accompanying her. She falls to earth, mimicking the people that she believes she's a descendant of. All of the royals believe that they're descendants of Cain. They're the Cains of the earth. And by the way, Brian mentioned David Icke. I talked to David before he even knew his name publicly, decades and decades ago. I think it might have even helped him start down this track. They laugh at us because we don't see they're cloaked, they're camouflaged, like their father himself, Satan, Lucifer, the devil in the garden, where he hid amongst the green leaves of the garden. They're cloaked. The reptilians walking amongst us. They look human, but their DNA, as far as they're concerned, is shared, some tincture of it, with Cain himself, with their father, the devil. They believe that. Doesn't matter where you believe it. They believe it. So what happened to Satan, Lucifer, the devil after the beguilement in the garden? He was made to crawl amongst the dust of the earth. He was a reptilian, and he was cursed, cold-blooded. Okay, so now you have the reptilians walking among us. The aliens, are they here yet? Are space aliens real? There you go. That's where they're getting a lot of this story. They're acting like, and by the way, there's stuff technology-wise like that. There's an interesting conversation there. So now let me start to bring this whole thing together for you. And I appreciate that you guys are very patient. You're a great crowd. And some of you have heard this before, but sometimes you got to hear it a couple times before it completely registers, okay? So now you have a group that have worked methodically over generations, over millennium, to get into positions of power. It's not different groups. They're the same families hidden. And they love the story of the phoenix, that about every 500 years takes and builds a pyre, a sacrificial altar, and then burns himself up in the sacrificial altar, completely consumed. Yet there's an egg that's left. And after the fire, born through the fire, the next phoenix arises. They love, if you look at their symbology, you think it's an eagle. It's not, it's a phoenix. Because they keep reinventing themselves. Same families, different name. You think it's a different group? No, Romans, Babylonians, the guys at Jericho, or whatever. They still are the same crowd. They believe that they're descendants all the way back to Cain. And think about the mentality in that city in Baal. Why would you want child sacrifice? What if you're the devil himself and you're getting these people to have the bad karma, which God will curse? God curses this. He destroys it, right? You want them to do things that will bring God's destruction on them. So they bring the child, they give it to the priest, they have the bad karma, and they're killing their own children and destroying the pure DNA seed from Adam and helping the hybridized seed to fix what didn't get fixed when Cain killed Abel. He didn't get to Adam, and there was still other seed that was pure seed to Adam. Why the Jews? Horrible people from their history, even sacrificing children. They did all sorts of horrible things. Yet they had within the culture, and they're not unique in that, by the way, had within the culture to only marry within the family, the 12 tribes, to remain with the uniqueness between the tribes, right? As a direct descendant within those families, naming themselves all the way back to Jacob, God changed his name to Israel, Isaac before him, Abraham before him, and all the way back to Adam. What is something so unique and bizarre and wild that you think is just for their own history in the Bible? The genealogies. Because they're showing you that this person is a direct descendant of Adam. This person is a direct descendant of Noah. This person is a direct descendant to David. And while there may be intermarriages around them, the most likely group on planet Earth to still have a direct pure blood, no hybridization descendant all the way back to Adam is within the Jewish families. So with that in mind, why would the devil want them uniquely targeted and destroyed? Because if he can kill all of humanity, what did the Church of Guidestones say? We only need 500 million people here on this planet. And at the time they were constructed, the number of people on the earth, what they were calling for is 500 million to survive. That just so happened to be 1/14 of the entire population of the world. 13 out of 14 people would have had to die. Okay, how many pieces of Osiris? See, if you remember when Hillary's stuff was released to WikiLeaks, and you saw that picture of her campaign manager, and he has 14 on his hand. Okay, they're all through it. In the Epstein releases that just happened, one of the unique things, he says, I'm a product of, I'm more in service to the Rothschild family. And then you have the cousin that comes in and says they're Baal worshipers. Okay? That's what this is all about. I can go through 100 different things and show you these families, and that they are, in fact, they're Luciferian. Even within Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma, he says right in the middle of his book, which is the basis for Freemasonry, modern Freemasonry. Albert Pike wrote the book, Morals and Dogma. He says he wrote it in green ink because the spirit that revealed all of these truths to him was green. Okay? And so in honor of that, he wrote Morals and Dogma in green ink, where he hid amongst the green leaves of the garden. And then he says in the middle of the book, let there be no misunderstanding. The God whom we serve, and he's the one that gave out first time, New World Order. They're creating a new world order. That was what this book was all about. We need a new world order for the ages, for the whole planet. It'll take 3 wars. And the third one will be a religious war between the 3 Abrahamic religions. Get the brothers fighting. Okay? It's a religious war. He says, let there be no misunderstanding. The God whom we serve is Lucifer. What was the temptation to Eve? Knowledge. She could catch up with Adam. She could go past Adam. God's afraid that you'll be as smart as he is because you'll know the difference between good and evil. She was baited in by knowledge because she was learning, but she had to go through a process to learn. She was going to get it all at once. Well, she got knowledge, okay. She got a baby. Then she taught Adam the trick. She got 2 babies. Got twins. Now you really got problems, okay? So that's this history leading to this moment in time. When we look at cultures where pedophilia is rampant, common, accepted, I think we have to think in terms that societally, many of these groups have intergenerationally been raised with certain ideas and beliefs that they then continue on. It seems relatively natural, and they want to be accepted even within their own groups for the stuff that they do, so they take it to different levels. And the pedophilia with children, the enslavement of children, the inculcation of getting them to think the same way, and then they pick and choose the ones that are the most adaptable, and the others are sacrificed. From a Baal position, the city of Baal, they wanted people that would give them favor to bring their children and give them, they're giants. They could do stuff with the farming, the building, the assemblage, all sorts of things. They have advanced knowledge. If they fell to Earth from space, they had advanced knowledge. In fact, part of the whole thing with the pyramids is that besides being power machines, actually, many of the structures were designed to preserve DNA. The whole embalming process wasn't to save the organs, the mind, the heart. That was all taken out of the body. They were preserved in a way that would preserve the DNA and the teeth. If you're an advanced space alien and you fell to Earth and you know where the technology will go, but you're on a planet where it isn't that advanced. And if you think of how a soul is brought into the body or out of the body, okay. Are you guys okay for another 5 minutes? Are going to go? Okay. You're very patient, and I know we have dinner coming like that. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll hurry. Boy, the pressure's on. I'm telling you, man. Okay. So do you live in this physical being, or is this just an avatar of your consciousness? Where is your consciousness actually at right this second? Is it in proximity to this? Is your physical body really just a receiver of a radio signal, a communication signal from somewhere else? And what would that signal look like? Kazarev found out that there was stuff that you couldn't find it with an electromagnetic detector, but it was still there. You could see it physically playing out in the physical world, but where was the energy coming from? So bear with me just a second. When eclipses happen, we can actually use what we have different devices, but I like torsion. It's the right word as far as I'm concerned, that can detect this other energy field. It's not electrical and it's not magnetic. It's not light. Where we can see it coming, we can get a magnetic detector, gauze detector out. We can't get, the electrical thing out and find it. We don't see it there. It's invisible to us. And so, yet when we use the right kind of a detector, when, say, Venus is coming up for an eclipse across the face of the sun, it's a little tiny planet, you got to get a telescope out to see it. And it goes across the face of the sun. When it first crosses where the two edges of the planet and the sun are about to cross, is what we call a chime moment, like ringing a bell. And in this other technology, we can see, boom, there's a huge spike in the energy field within this subatomic field. Very real. This isn't voodoo. It's not spiritualism. It's a physical, real effect. It's just that most of the instruments that the scientists use are optical, electrical, or magnetic, and they don't detect this field. But when you use torsion as your detector, a torsion detector, boom, it's just right there. And it's at the instant the two begin to cross paths. It's a torsion effect. As Venus crosses into, all the way eclipsing the sun from our perspective, as the last little piece of the planet starts to cross the edge of the sun, boom! Another chime moment, bigger. Then it settles down and it's going through. Think of throwing a rock in a stream, in a big splash, right? And that's kind of what's happened. It moves all the way across the sun. When it gets to the other side, there's another chime moment, boom! And you see the detector, oh my gosh, that thing's going off. And then as it gets to the other side, there's a smaller one, boom! And it clears and it's gone. Imagine this. Okay, here's where I'm going. Okay, you want frequency? Okay, all right, here we go. Space aliens, sci-fi. When you look at these occult groups, for example, up there in England, where they build caves And the caves are designed so that every 20 years, when Venus crosses the sun, the light comes straight in the cave. 19 and a half years. It comes straight in the cave. And it's so bright, even though it's dark outside in the pre-dawn, it's so precisely aligned. It's a polarized light coming in. It's like daylight inside a cave and you're 100 feet down the cave. Because it's perfectly aligned with Venus. We see other stuff with the pyramids perfectly aligned with other stars in a similar way. And it's just polarized light from that. And Venus is very bright in that specific situation. And why would that be important? Okay, here it comes. This is really big. Hollywood. Oh man, how's it go to there? Hollywood in the 1950s stopped everything. The studios wouldn't cooperate with each other with stars, because the studio would build up a star and they'd have them all in their films, and you knew when you went to one of the theaters with their film, you were going to see that group of stars. And so they would make very big things about each of their stars, almost competing studio to studio. Something wild happened. Three studios got together and allowed their best actors to be in a movie together. And the movie was all about a very specific thing, about space aliens, Forbidden Planet, with Robbie the Robot, which I love. Making alcohol for the cook. Robbie the Robot. Yeah. So Forbidden Planet was a planet far, far away. And the scientist that was marooned there or left there with his, baby daughter or whatever, learning about that civilization that had been dead for eons. They had huge, massive computers. And when the race, according to the way the movie is written, the Krell, when the race was dying out, their technology, their understanding, think of it this way. What are our megalomaniacs, the Elons of the world, the Zuckerbergs, all the other ones, what are they trying to do? They're trying to figure out how to get immortality by downloading their consciousness into a machine. So God can't take them. They won't suffer eternal wrath. If they can download their consciousness into a machine, they bypass judgment. So what's going on? In Forbidden Planet, the race became so spectacularly advanced. And in the original, not just the movie, which kind of goes over a little bit, their consciousness is downloaded in the machine. I can tell you that Howard Hughes believed that, and by the way, it was Hughes Space Systems that sent all the drones to the moon before our astronauts landed, 30 of them, 36 it was. Land on the moon, map the surface of the moon. It's very interesting stuff. It's all in the public. This isn't voodoo science. And he believed that the moon was full of technology, computers. What did it say in Forbidden Planet? Computers as far as the eye could see, 20 miles deep, still computers. All this complex technology to store the consciousness of an entire race of beings who are dying out, going beyond physicality. Would some advanced race use something as cumbersome and difficult to get enough power out of, that has all sorts of limitations as electrons, to move power around to power the minds, their machines, these systems in a permanent situation? Or is there something beyond electromagnetic and light, the subatomic, okay? If you imagined a race that's 5,000 years advanced from us now, Are they still transmitting power down a power line or even through a laser or whatever? Is there another technology that exists? Within Forbidden Planet, where creatures are created by just the guy's thoughts going through the machine and materializing, what they believe, and part of the reason for doing their stuff at torsion moments is that their understanding, going back to the people who were their ancient fathers, which were these Baal worshipers, the giants, the ones that fell to earth, they landed here in this kind of a scenario because of some cosmic cataclysm in space. 200 in their lifeboat fell to earth, landed on the earth, and then no technology. How good is your technology if you don't have other computers to communicate with? Your cell phone doesn't mean anything without a transmitter, without a tower, whatever. They were highly advanced technological, and they lost all that. But they do know that there's a way that they could live, be born again in this world. What is it? Because if you don't actually live in the physical world, what if your consciousness is in like a safe or a vault, a location that's like the radio transmitter receiver at another spot, an avatar type scenario, and that it is tied very precisely to you and you only by your DNA. Your DNA is made up of crystalline material. And even the shape of it is shaped like, technically it works like a tuning fork. And so this tuning fork with 4 different materials in each side and a tail, like a tuning fork, and then done like a ladder, all these little tuning forks. Trillions of little tuning forks that are unique to every single person. I'm close to closing, but I want to get this out so that people will understand it and tie this all together. I had a person who, her thing of she was a spiritist type person that I came across. Somebody asked me to do something that was a very serious situation. And she needed a toothbrush, some hair, something with the DNA of the person that she was trying to find and find out what happened to them. And then she'd hold the hairbrush, the toothbrush, whatever had the DNA. And then she would receive and see in her mind, Dorothy Allison was her name, very famous, very, very famous. And she was no crackpot. I can tell you that the experiences I had with her were just unbelievable. Not that I had to agree with her, but it was incontestable that she was getting stuff. I would say that it was demonic, whatever, but at the end, I don't want to promote it. I'm just telling you it was a physical observation fact as far as I was concerned. What was she doing? If there's torsion, see, your heart actually puts out a torsion signal. We can read it too, okay? We have torsion detectors, can read that. She was putting it right here close to her heart, and she was amplifying it, making it resonate with her torsion signal. This other person's gone, but she's causing the DNA in there like a guitar string to resonate, and she could see what that person saw in their last moments in this world. And she would, and I can tell you, stunning. The last location on this particular thing that she had no knowledge of what I had done, what I had. No other person on planet Earth knew what I had. And she had several things that she said, it's this and this and this and this. This last thing on the list was a name, very unusual name. And we went out to this location, and I'd just been there the day before. There was nothing with that name on it. He says, no, it's like a neon light. It's so huge. You can't miss it. It's right there. The name of the killer is right there. Get out there, and overnight somebody put a campaign sign for a candidate for office, all the bright colors and everything else. It's right on the front lawn at that location. It wasn't there 12 hours earlier. And it's one letter difference. And she says it's almost the name of the killer. And that was the name I had from other stuff. Anyway, so she was amplifying the DNA and being able to reach not to the DNA's information, but to consciousness tied to that DNA. These people believe, and those aliens that fell to Earth, if that story were true, those 200, why did they want to marry the descendants of Adam, the humans and all that? Because they were all male. There was no females. They were a freaking, war party of some sort. They knew if they preserved their DNA commingled with the other DNA and it survived, we would be where we are now technology-wise. And someday they could be resurrected like Jurassic Park and brought back to life because their consciousness is still in that lockbox tied to a very precise frequency, DNA frequency for communication. Is your soul here, or is it in an adjacent area that's very physical? We know that the torsion area, subatomic physics, is smaller than an electron. Doesn't mean it's not real. It's just too small for our big clumsy machines to be able to grab and look at and everything else. Still very real. It's not voodoo. And if the consciousness is tied to that, that's the medium where your consciousness is recording. Think of, I had a friend, he's moving. His kids have been fighting. He hears them in the garage. He thinks they're fighting again. He stops by the door at the garage to hear what's going on. And the brother says, "No, I'm telling you, those are the biggest CDs I have ever seen in my life. I didn't even know they had machines to play those big CDs." And his sister's like, "No way. They're records, 78s. It's not a CD, wrong term." But that was how the difference in technology storage. Now we do it on a little teeny thing. We do trillions of times more than you ever did on that little recorder. These people believe Howard Hughes was in a crowd where he knew what the conversation was. And he knew these were evil people. He was trying to do his own intelligence operation. They believe that they stored their consciousness, some prior race, in huge banks of computers under the surface of the moon. They do their rituals because during those ritual moments, during eclipses, you get a strong torsion signal. So they're on some kind of a low, they're in limp mode most of the time. But when you hit a torsion moment, if you're focused on that, the third strand DNA is what they believe they have, is activated in a very precise, resonant way. It resonates and rings like a bell during those types of events, and they can gate consciousness. And also for productive reasons, different areas of the DNA are resonating during that time that activate other things that you wouldn't normally activate in any powerful way. That's the cult that we're dealing with. Now, I don't care if it's real or not. This is what they believe, and they're getting more and more coherent in the way they talk between each other, because we're coming out of this Babel moment. Computers have overturned what happened at the Tower of Babel, and now everybody can communicate. And God said there would be nothing which they couldn't do if they could communicate. So he made it so they couldn't communicate anymore. We're coming out of that moment. They're becoming coherent. And they're now the threat with their AIs. They believe they have other technology. Their goal is to kill every last descendant of Adam who isn't hybridized. And of the ones that are there, they want to so cook their minds that they own and control the thoughts, the understanding. And that's part of the whole thing. Now, whether the pedophile or monster or whatever fully understands even a teeny part of this, doesn't really matter. In the broader culture, this is part of what's being pushed through to make this all happen. Do you see where I'm going with this? So we have now an existential threat to us as humans, to society. They have to own the children and where the children are going. If we're to make it, we have to protect the children. And by the way, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, imagine an environment where every single thing that reaches your DNA activates certain sections of it, but not other sections. Or it's like putting your finger on a guitar string and it dampens it and you don't get the note. Even the frequency that's used for tuning instruments, everything that's coming, the light blink rate on the computer screens and things that you're touching, affecting how your brain works. Full spectrum dominance. You're dealing with a evil entity that's as smart as anything right next to God. Those things that we wouldn't know in another 100,000 million years as people necessarily through the normal learning process, except for divine assistance. Using full spectrum dominance within the human field to make it so we can't think straight. Our kids don't think straight. We don't eat right. Anything you put in your body resonates with frequencies that damage the ability of the body to stay in tune, to live, to be healthy. So even when you talk the technology where you can make a torsion signal coherent as opposed to scattered and incoherent is very valid technology, okay? And so I'd be very interested in looking at the stuff that you're doing and others, because I'm very familiar with that on lots of levels. And I believe, Tika, that you're on an important track. It may not get traction with a lot of crowds, especially in a spiritual crowd, even a church crowd like that, because they don't understand. This is has real physicality. It's not voodoo. And so, but that also applies to everything you're hearing, all the media, even the people speaking. They're speaking to us in a very scattered way because the devil wants our thoughts to be scattered. So we're not able to, on our side, become fully coherent and work together. They want their side fully coherent. They want the babble to go away on their side, but they don't want that for us. So let me say a quick prayer. Father God, I pray that those things which review in this presentation would remain with the folks. And if I've missed it somewhere, it wasn't relevant, didn't quite get it right, that fall away. I pray that you would allow us as a community to reach out within our community and be effective in bringing the world out of this horrid moment, the dangers that we're in, the devil himself trying to cause us to destroy ourselves. We pray for favor, strength, coherence, genius even, in how to approach our own children and other children to help them to steer away and to come out of this chaos, come out of this Babel, come out of Babylon, and to come to fruitfulness, right thinking, straight thinking before you. We ask for your mercy, your blessing, and that we be missionaries of salvation by the blood of Christ, that we would all enjoy an eternity in your presence, Father God, where there is no evil forever, where there is perfection, where we can interact without any shadow of darkness between us and enjoy the company, not of our own friends and relatives, but of generations beyond measure in your presence, Father God, doing good, enjoying life, and building out this universe that you've given us to occupy. We thank you for this moment. Bless this to your use, the conversations yours here and beyond. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, and I need to be cautious. I'll be around. I'm glad to answer questions. I want to be courteous to the other speaker, and I apologize for going so long. Okay. Yes. I'm glad to answer questions, but it's up to you.
Is Michelle on? No, we're going to do questions.
Oh, Michelle, oh my gosh. Michelle, oh my gosh.
You guys, hang on.
I'm so sorry.
You guys, we really, let's give a round of applause for Juan O'Savin. I mean, Everybody can stand
What's
up.
on my notes? I can't find my notes.
I know.
Where'd my notes go?
He's winging it. He's winging it. So we just want to thank Juan because he's a genius and brilliant, and he could go on and on. We have other speakers, but let's do some questions. And Juan, you're going to be here tomorrow because we have
We'll be here
and
tomorrow.
we're going to have time for him to really go for it. He's going to do a 3-day weekend at his room in the Comfort Inn. No, I'm kidding, but he's got so much. You can see this man's brain is just out there.
Well, let me say this. The devil didn't want me here. Didn't want Jennifer here. They tried everything. Stopped airplanes.
There was a gremlin, green little ears on the wing of the airplane. The pilot comes back. He looks right at my seat, says, "Could you move over, sir?" I didn't realize I was that big. I'm blocking the window. He's looking at the wing. "Oh, I just want to make sure the de-icing worked." Okay, all right. Well, they just de-iced. I don't know. So he's halfway back. We're experiencing some problems, and our flaps aren't working anymore. And it happened right at takeoff. And so we're going to have to land at Charlotte instead of Asheville because we need longer runway. And then, he thinks the mic's off. Could I borrow your rosary beads for a minute before we get? Oh yeah, no problem. No, this happens all the time. All the rescue vehicles, fire trucks beside the runway, another plane coming in right beside us, looking at us. It's piece cake. No problem. Don't worry about it. By the way, one other thing I didn't say, George Bush Sr. He fell to earth 3 times, 70th birthday, 80th birthday, 90th birthday. What did he do? He jumped out of an airplane and parachuted to earth because they're mimicking their father. It's a religious ceremony for them. The Queen, the man who fell to earth, James Bowie, with the movie that all Hollywood want to make me do. Excuse me, Forbidden Planet? A planet far, far away. They all believe it's the moon. And then the studios work together because they're helping to promote the idea that they're going to be reborn, Jurassic Park. And then one other last thing. Charlton Heston. Soylent. The green plant, green man. Okay, it's the green energy revolution. It's the devil himself. He's laughing at us. He's right there in plain sight. Okay, take a couple questions. I'll get out of the way. Go ahead.
President Trump has just this week been reiterating his emphasis on AI.
Yes.
And as you were alluding to, we all know, I assume, great dangers with AI.
Yep.
I want to be confident that President Trump is steering that in the right direction, but he has to have all the big tech players with him around the world.
So, yeah. So the deal with AI is this. In reality, the devil's a liar. Okay? He's trying to convince all these people of stuff that is not actually technically true. You could create a machine that could have every last thing about you in it. It's still in the physical world. If your consciousness is elsewhere, your consciousness is elsewhere. It's still only that your body can be an avatar. You could tune a machine to be precise enough in that frequency, but and you would then be out of your box, your cage. There's a lot of stuff about the descriptions of hell that would seem to indicate that they're trapped there. If your DNA was destroyed, why do you do these sarcophaguses where you're preserving the DNA for thousands of years that are designed to preserve DNA? Because you're not going to be physically reborn in that body. Your DNA is being preserved in the teeth and other places by that process, and then it could be reanimated, joined again to be brought back to life. That doesn't make the computer sentient. Now, this week, there's been huge conversations. Has one of the big AI systems become conscious? The part you have to remember in all of that is the devil's a liar, and all of these priests of technology are actually also magicians. What was happening with Elijah with the priests of Baal? Why were they so upset and wanted to put water onto Elijah's offering? Because they had put pyrotechnics in theirs, and theirs didn't work, okay? they were going to do magic. They didn't mind. They were ready to do the test with Elijah because they knew that they had the best pyrotechnics in the world and they could hide it better than anybody else. And we'll do a big trick. Okay. And the reason that God did what he did with Elijah's is because it was a lightning bolt so strong, it had nuclear like effect to fuse the sand at temperatures that you couldn't get in a normal wood burning fire, right? So with that in mind, even with a whole planet full of computers to store information, that still isn't somebody's soul. And then, by the way, one other quick thing that I think is important. So twins have almost identical DNA. Not exactly identical, but very, very nearly so. Twins often talk about being able to hear the other twins' thoughts, to remember something. All mothers during traumatic events, I remember hearing a mother whose son died in Vietnam, and she was talking about it. And she was doing something in the course of the day, and then all of a sudden she knew something was wrong, and she felt it. And she called her sister, something's wrong, and she only had the one boy. And she just knew something was wrong. And 3 days later, there's the guys at the door. Your son died. He died within that very couple of minutes that she felt that. How could she feel that across space? From an electromagnetic light side, normal physics, what connection using photons, electrons, could possibly have transmitted information? So it's a subatomic field. It's this other torsion field. In that field, we actually can measure it when we look at stars. We can look at where a star's at, and it has to do with rotational energy. And they're off, 500 light years out. So the star, where I see the light moves at 186,262 feet per second, miles per second. And it's like, and so that light from that star at the speed of light, say it's 100 light years away, okay? If I look at that star with a torsion detector, I can't find it. If I calculate the direction of the star and where it would be physically right now, I find it at 64 times the speed of light location ahead. It's not forever ahead, whatever, it's a very precise number. So all of a sudden we're looking at a very physical effect, and we can see it with detectors. You just have to have the right kind of detector. It's not there where the light is because that's from a long time ago. It's there because that's physically where it's at. And the energy in torsion travels 64 times the speed of light. So we know exactly where to look for it and exactly what the speed of a difference between that and speed of light is. So they want to cause the illusion that they can live forever by downloading their consciousness into a computer, and then they would survive past it. Can you make a computer complex enough to mimic the DNA precisely and allow them out? I don't believe that they think so, and here's why. If that was the way they'd go about it, they'd have probably made other types of equipment. No, they want to merge with the DNA of the children of Adam because they still need that physical life in some way in order to become an avatar, express it. Yes?
So, the story, is that true? That Earth girls are desirable in the great.
Oh, yeah, these guys, I mean, they fell head over heels over the Earth girls. I'm telling you that we're not safe. We are not safe. It's look, most of the wealth of the planet ends up in women's hands. They outlive us. So, the women are more wealthy than the guys are. I remember being trapped at Nordstrom's with 3 teenage girls, and I had to call, a 911 shopper hostage rescue team. And they came and they had to use plastic explosives to get me free. Visa, MasterCharge, American Express, these Earth women, I'm telling you, man, it's tough. But okay, another question. I answered all the questions. There you go. I'm just okay. Well, see, Israel, one other quick thing. Yeah, she was asking about Israel, who moved Israel in 47. It was actually 1917. Well, let me just say this. So I call the current political operation in Israel political Israel. And the reason I say that is we have lots of Christians, Jews, Muslims. When 67 war happened and the Jews came in and took over Jerusalem, one of my friends was met by one of the Muslim priests right there in Jerusalem, who walked him through all of the holy areas, the mountain, everything else, explained everything to him. And, like a brother, and to explain the importance of certain things and what they were doing. He wasn't pushing away, wasn't trying to kill him. They worked together on this as sons of Abraham. What do we call the work that we're doing right now? The Abraham Accords. We're all children of Abraham. Ishmael, even though he's a half brother to Isaac, is a half brother. Abraham's still his father. The promise to Abraham of a seed for nations still extends to Ishmael, much of the Muslims in that crowd. So when Israel was created by buying all this land, was it with good intent, or just like the giants were planted in that area to block the children of Israel, block the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who became Israel? His name was changed. Were they there before? No. The devil, like a great big chessboard, moved giants into the land to block the children of Abraham from being able to take their inheritance. And then they built fortresses. Jericho was a great fortress. And by the way, when they look at Jericho, and Tika's not in the room right now, when they look at Jericho, the walls didn't fall over. The walls went right down on the ground. Remember what happened? They marched around Jericho for 7 days. And on the seventh day, they marched around Jericho 7 times. And they were singing and doing the drums and frequency. They were making a great noise when they did this. Imagine like a drummer. So if you've ever seen the big gong where, they come up and they hit the whoom, the thing. They don't do that. What they do is they tap the gong and get it resonating, get it moving. If you just go hit it like that, you'll break the gong because the energy goes through, it'll crack it. So you have to get it moving a little bit, resonating, and then you can hit it hard, okay? So they were getting resonance into the ground in that area when they did the 7th time and had the big thing. What do you want to bet? There was some type of celestial event happening at exactly the same time that somehow bled torsion into that event. And it says the walls went straight down. They went down like the curtain fell. Pretty interesting. And there's a lot of people done a lot of work on that. It's pretty interesting. Okay, another question. Okay, last question. This is a very last one. I'm done with questions because we're going to let Melissa have her spot. Okay, go ahead. Michelle have her spot. Go ahead. Yes. Well, okay. What's the tale of Gilgamesh? It's the second oldest tale that we've found in the stone writings on planet Earth. So the tale of Gilgamesh is that a god fell to earth, a god king, essentially the Mount Hermon story with the 200. And so then a bull of heaven fell to earth. By the way, every one of the Greek gods of the Parthenon is represented in New York around where the buildings were at 9/11. They have all their symbology. They were all witnesses. It was a spiritual event. They were doing a religious ceremony at 9/11, by the way, and in the heavens, the Golden Gate was right during that particular window. By the way, 9/11 is the date that many of us calculate. I think is beyond question. 9/11, 3 BC is the date that Christ's true birthday was on. So that's why they had to have the spectacle damaging that date. But for example, the Bull of Wall Street in the Tale of Gilgamesh, a bull fell from heaven and then it's rampaging around the earth, right? Destroying everything, don't get in the way. Well, the Bull of Wall Street, nobody commissioned it publicly. There was no permits for it. It just one day shows up next to Wall Street right there. And it's such a beautiful piece of art. It's so expensive. It's, and it just shows up, and who's going to move it? It's too heavy. You don't have a permit. You don't know where to put it. They just left it there. And it later came out who was behind it. But what was the real deal? It was an occult thing. They needed the bull of heaven there, along with all the other gods arrayed around the buildings there in New York for the ceremony, to watch this birthing ceremony. And that's what it was, to gate in spirits, like a birthing canal. There at 9/11, to gate in the evil spirits, and then to show the evil spirits coming in the smoke with all sorts of magic pen to make it look like there was demons in the smoke and stuff like that, gating in. So that's the rest of the story there. So in this Tale of Gilgamesh, when the bull is rampaging, Gilgamesh, this god king, goes out to fight the bull. He can't quite defeat it by himself. So another adjacent god king from another area nearby joins him, and they tag team to take out this bull of heaven, and finally succeed. Hillary believes that you can reverse that story. She's very into this whole thing because it also goes to the space aliens. What people talking about right now? What's in the WikiLeaks? Hillary's asking Podesta, is it time to play the alien card? Okay, it's all through this. I'm telling you, you're watching a fight. And then, by the way, so who are the guys fighting this? President Trump has said that he was invited to run for office. Who invited him? Was it Elon? Was it Zuckerberg? Was it, Hillary? Who invited him? He's also said 200 generals. We have about 800 generals and then flag officers, in our military at this time. There's been a faithful component that has been working. How do we get this back? Even before President Kennedy was killed, many of them understood what was going on. We're trying to come up with a way to do it. The movie 7 Days in May, things like that. How would you take back the country? Okay, lots of gaming this out. And the way a lot of the work was done, even back in the mid 70s, late 70s on the computers, and I knew the guys that did it, saw some of the work. Part of the gaming out, even into the 80s, was pretend a space aliens were invading planet Earth. How would we as humans respond to it? If there was only a few of them, it wasn't billions, it was just a few hundred. The number they used to game it out was 200. What would they do to take control of the Earth? They'd have to have the locations where commerce happens, where you get your goods, who makes the goods, the economy, the money, the medical, everything, full spectrum dominance. And the other side was gaming it out. Our guys realized in an age of Patton, MacArthur, the threats going on, what it was. How do we regain control from this crowd that has taken control of governments around the world, like we've been invaded by aliens, literally? Reptilians in high office. That's what's been gamed out, and that's what Trump is doing, is what they have gamed out. You can't win unless you get this. And at the very end, what's the two things that you have to own to take back control of the planet? Honest elections and honest money. Okay? And it's a prayerful thing. From a government orchestrated side, that doesn't necessarily work. From an individual side, we all need God's help, God's assistance. We have to look, and God communicates with people his own way. We all find him. We may come to it, but at the end of the day, by the way, and this is why the blood of Christ is so important. In the New Testament, it says that the blood of Christ is able to cleanse from all sin. So think about this for a second. If the original sin was convoluting of the DNA, could you clean the DNA back up? Remember, it says related to the rapture, whenever you think it's going to happen, before, during, after the tribulation, it says that when Christ returns, we will all be changed in an instant. The dead in Christ rise first, and then the living. Not all know physical death, but all will be changed. If the DNA is corrupted and has this evil attachment to it, it's not that the DNA has changed. In fact, that's why they call it third strand DNA. If I take and touch a guitar string in different areas on the string, I make different notes, and I make it express differently. If your DNA is being tampered with, it expresses and builds out differently. So it doesn't work quite right. And if everything in the world around you is making your DNA not resonate correctly, it dampens it weird. So now, if you're going to live in a perfect body, if you're going to be allowed into God's heaven, and by the way, let me just add this one thing. Resurrection was to the physical body. What did Thomas do when he met Christ? He put his hand in his side. He put his hand in the palm where the nails had gone through. Christ was every bit as real, and the resurrection of his body was his physical body, which was later caught up into heaven physically. So if we're going to be living in a resurrection period, it talks about the dead in Christ rise first. Well, that's a physical body out of the grave. That's why we don't do, from a Christian standpoint, it's a symbology thing, but we believe that we're resurrected in the body, so we bury the bodies whole as opposed to, burning them. But it's, it's not that somebody's not making it to heaven if they were cremated, but it's the symbology there. So with that in mind, what if, and this is a question everybody comes to, do I have DNA of Cain, reptilian DNA? Am I a hybrid? Am I damaged and don't know it? Hidden stuff in there. But even if you did, at the resurrection, that's the correction. The resurrection is the correction. All will be changed. Not all will know physical death. So even if within your bloodline, you're not pure or perfect back to Adam, you still can be cleansed by the blood of Christ, okay? And know eternal life. Folks, thank you so much.